Hey guys, you in the mood for a large drill press? Stick around, we're going to see what this thing looks like. Okay, so like a lot of you guys, I've been on a bit of a tool journey, and what I mean by that is, you start out what you can afford, upgrade as you go. I make projects in the shop, sell them on, and then use that money to invest it back in the shop most times. And I've upgraded my planer, my table saw, wood lathe, bandsaw, that kind of stuff. And I feel like this is the end of the journey. And what I mean by that is, sure, I'll get smaller tools here and there, but as far as upgrades to bigger items, I think this is the end of the line. This is a 17-inch Harbor Freight. Of course, I think the name of it's, yes, Central Machinery. But this is not the largest one they had, but it's not the smallest either. They had a 13-inch I was also considering. I decided to go with this and just cause some of the extra features in it. But either way, let's get started unboxing this thing. So if some of you guys watched my previous videos, you'll see me use my smaller drill press a lot. Of course, it's not in the background. I did end up selling that thing to kind of help pay for this one. But it was a 5-speed, also a Central Machinery. Served me well for a lot of years, but deciding to upgrade to a larger one. That thing stood about yay tall. Of course, I had it on a stand. But let's dive this thing in here. So the first thing you see when we open this thing up are the handles and the table. And just like anything you get from Harbor Freight, it's covered very generously in some type of oil. And then there's some other hardware in here as well. Here is the handle for the table here too, and this one is a rack and pinion style table. It's one of the main reasons I wanted this one, because it was a little bit frustrating on the old one. You had to loosen a little clamp, just wiggle it up and down to set it where you wanted it, whereas this one you can take the handle and crank it up and down. Oh, and to give you a bit of a heads up, this thing is extremely heavy, so you might want to have an extra hand or two around to help you move this thing in your shop. Okay, and some of you may know, but this particular drill press is probably set up more in mind for someone who is doing metal work and not necessarily woodwork. And so the one that's below this, the 13-inch, would have probably been just fine for woodworking. But the base was a lot smaller, and that's another reason that it drew me to this one. So it's going to be more stable. Of course, I'll be attaching this probably through the floor and maybe even to the wall too. So if you read the instructions, the very first thing they tell you to lay out here is the base, and you can see how wide that is. And you can see these bottles too, and that's another reason I say this is probably designed more for the metal worker, just because you can put your oil in here and have it be dripping on the pieces you're cutting. But I don't know that I'll be mounting these just because I probably won't be doing a lot of metal work in here. So let's get started with that. I'll clean this thing up, and then we'll work on the upright here to go on that. Okay, and you want to clean off this greasy substance, some type of oil they put on there just to keep it from rusting. And you can use several different things, brake cleaner or something to that effect. And I'm sure the instructions probably tell you a certain substance. But what I've got in the shop is some denatured alcohol. This should work just fine for cleaning this thing up. Just want to get all that oil off there. because that will attract dust for one. And then later on, once you get everything assembled, use something like a WD-40 dry lubricant or something like that, and that'll keep these things in good shape, keep them from rusting. Stop. Okay, so up next is the upright here. Of course, there's 4 bolts in here that you'll want to line up. Of course, this plastic bag, and remove that. And it doesn't really say to, but in my opinion, you should either remove this piece here and add some type of grease, just so that this rack and pinion operates smoothly. You can do it on the gears too, but I think if you can apply it directly to the gear inside of here that turns, you'd probably be better off. So we'll go ahead and find the bolts for this, get this cleaned up and get it greased. And up next is the motor. So as you can see, most of the smaller parts I've got laid up here on the table saw with the blade down, just, so there's no problems. And of course, anything here that you can see that has some type of a greasy substance, you want to wipe that down, get it off of there so it doesn't cause you problems later on. Go ahead and get this table all cleaned up before we move on to the next step. So it's a good idea on these small parts to have them organized to where you can see them. Nothing worse than looking for parts and then you've got them scattered everywhere. So it's a good idea to have a little area out there to where you can see everything, know where it's at, and when you get to the next step, you ain't got to hunt everywhere for it, and makes things a lot more efficient. Okay, guys, and I'm sure they probably don't tell you in the instructions. I kind of skimmed over it there. But these particular bolts that come with this individual one, they have a 5/8 head on them. At least that's what it appears to be. So it's a good idea to have either a wrench on hand or a socket and a ratchet. And of course, as with anything, you want to just kind of set these in there loose for the time being. That way you can kind of adjust if you need to move this thing back and forth. And once you get everything lined up, then you can cinch them down. Go ahead and stop that anymore. Okay, and luckily they have added just a tiny bit of grease on here, but this thing just kind of sits loosely in here. So we're going to go ahead and take this thing off and add a little bit of grease in here, reassemble that. That way it should be good for a long time. Okay guys, so if you see in here is where I'm talking about. There's actually gear here, and this handle goes on there and twists, and it's what allows this to raise up and down. You can see they've added a little grease to that. We're going to go ahead and add a little extra. Go ahead and put you a dab on there. And then work that in a little bit. Once you run it around a few times, you'll get it moved around the way it needs to be. Just be warned, when you've got it out like this, that can push out a little bit, but it just moves right back in place. So we'll go ahead and grease this up, back over to the stand. Be a little bit warned, guys, if you do take this apart, going to put the grease on it and that kind of stuff, it is a little bit tricky to get back on there because you do need to have this, I call it a gear, I'm not sure what the actual name of this is, but this spline piece here in with that gear before you attach it. So you got to have both lined up and then set it down there. A little complicated, but we got it nonetheless. And then there's a little clamp type deal that you screw in back here too. So if you set it at one height, you lock it in there, it won't move up and down. So next up, after you put your assembly back together here, there is a collar here that was on there before. So hopefully you can pay attention maybe to how you took it off. But if you do, you'll notice there's one edge that's tapered. That tapered part has to go down to the top of this. It just kind of holds everything in place. Just make sure it's good and snug there. And tighten your little set screw up. It doesn't have to be super tight, just kind of hold it in place. I had this mounted on here, but that thing only goes on one way. Once you get it installed, same deal. Use the Allen wrench, tighten up the little set screw in there, and then you should be good. Shouldn't have to fool with that anymore. So guys, one thing you may have to adjust for, and I don't know if you pay attention to that, when I was tightening that set screw, it did seem like it was just never tightening. And sure enough, you pull it out here and the threads are stripped. Luckily, I have some bolts on hand. I don't have a set screw, but these are going to be about right size. And I've got a tap, so we're going to tap this thing and get our threads back. Hopefully, we can move on to the next step. I can tell you, this is an extremely soft metal, so that's probably aluminum or something, so they probably didn't mean for you to put a lot of torque into it, so just be warned of that. But we've got that thing tapped out there, and hopefully shouldn't have any more issues. Okay, so far I'm liking it, but if there is one negative I can say, some of these machine surfaces leave a lot to be desired. They could have took some time and kind of finely tuned these, put a little extra polish on them. But this table right here is pretty rough. I'm gonna take a little piece of sandpaper and knock a lot of that down, keep things smoother. Which eventually I'll be adding a wooden table to this, just to give us a larger surface. But we'll go ahead and get this thing sanded up and clean up some of these rough surfaces. A good word of caution here too, around these corners here, just knock it down a little bit. There's some burrs in there that could definitely give you a nasty little cut if you're not careful. Another thing, they could have took literally just 5 minutes and made this a lot nicer. Of course, I guess the price reflects for that. This, as of this recording, is normally $399. Luckily, I got sent a coupon for 25% off. Figure that up, that's $100 off, so I got it for $299, which just happens to be the same price as the 13-inch. But for the price, I thought it was worth it for the extra features. And like I said, a larger table, larger base. This one comes with a light, but just needs a little polishing. So we'll finish up on some of this, and then next we'll work on the motor. So this stuff, guys, it's a good idea to have an extra hand with you. That is a pretty heavy. It says in the manual it's about 55 pounds. So don't do anything and damage your back. We'll go ahead and get this thing set up there. It's a good idea to kind of get your bearings about where this piece is that's going to sit right on top. Whew. Okay, guys, just a couple words of advice here that maybe, if you're like me, reading through all those words, you kind of get jumbled. So for me, I'm a little better explaining things when I see it hands-on. My old drill press had one little lock knob here, and then you could move the motor back and forth, and that tensioned your belts. This one's actually got two. One here. Of course, you can't see it, but just across on the other side is another one. And then you take this little knob here, move it back and forth, and that allows you to tension your belts, loosen them up, that kind of stuff, so you can set the speeds. And speaking of that, this is a 16 speed, and then of course under the belt cover here you can see all the speeds, and then they range anywhere from 200 RPMs to 3,630 RPMs, and this gives you a guide as to where to put these belts to achieve that speed. One other little word of advice, I won't show you everything in here, but these little instructions, when you're reading them, it's almost as if someone had this apart and putting it together, which is handy in case you ever need to do that. But this all comes assembled as a unit because it tells you to install the motor, install the pulleys, that kind of stuff. But that stuff comes already assembled, and you just more or less bolt the main components together. So just a word of advice, you ain't got to do some of the things the instructions say in here. But I think we're almost there. Next, we're going to install this chuck. And the way they recommend you doing this thing, of course, after you clean it up, of course, put that on there, and have a piece of wood, and just put some pressure on it. And the reason being, this is a Morse taper fit in here. It doesn't bolt on or anything. It's just pressed together, and that will actually lock that thing in place, much like you'd see on a wood lathe. Same principle there. It's the way my old one worked too, but this is a much larger one. And I think this is going to be plenty heavy duty enough in this shop. Guys, we've got everything set up here. I've got a Forstner bit in here, just kind of, those tend to take a little more force than just a regular drill bit. But I grabbed a piece of cedar just because it was closest to me. Very clean cut, and that's at least a 1-inch board. You can see even no tear out on that as far as that goes, and good and smooth. And so I wanted to push it just a little. Grabbed a piece of oak. It's not as thick, of course. But still the same result, very clean, no problem getting through there. But I think this thing's going to be extremely powerful. It's way more powerful than my old drill press. This one also, I wanted to show you too that it has a light. Now one thing, I will be trying to find an LED replacement for that. It works fine, it's just I think a LED is a much nicer light. But overall, I really like this thing. Like I said, plenty of power. I like the features. The handles are, they're okay. I may add some different type handles to that later on. That's just kind of a minor thing. The adjustments, the speeds, I'm super happy with that. If there was a negative I'd have to add to this, it would definitely be the fact that they just, didn't take their time to kind of put the finishing touches on it. But after about 10 or 15 minutes with a file and some sandpaper, it makes it ultra nice. Not knocking down the tables around in the corners just a touch, just so you're not getting cut with them, making things smooth. And I think this thing is going to serve me well in the future. And like I said, I'm glad I made this upgrade. So guys, if you stuck with me this far, I truly appreciate it. We lost some audio and had some bad audio in the last few scenes, so I apologize about that. Didn't catch it till after it was already done. One thing I wanted to point out that lost audio completely was if you're going to be using this as a metalworking drill press, this bottle mounts up here and allows your lubricant to drop down on the surface, that kind of stuff. And there are 4 screws on this side that allows that to be bolted right to the side of the drill press. Anyway, wanted to touch base on that just so you know, in case you were wondering where that was, that we just lost audio on it. But anyway, that's going to do it for this one. I appreciate you sticking with me this far. If you have any comments or questions, leave those below in the comment section. Like the video, subscribe to us if you haven't already, and hit that little notification bell that lets you know when we upload a new one. And as always, I thank you for joining me, and we'll see you on the next one.